Level up your LA Kings experience with the new Vivid Seats Elite Seats. All the on-ice Kings action with even more exclusive access. Enjoy great seats to the game along with premier dining inside the Lexus Club with all-you-can-eat food and non-alcoholic beverages. Plus, get a free Team LA Kings item and parking with your purchase. Score your Vivid Seats Elite Seats tickets today and earn rewards on each purchase from the only ticket company that rewards you for buying. Experience it live with Vivid Seats, the official partner of the LA Kings.
You're listening to an LA Kings podcast. For more episodes of this and every other Kings program, visit lakings.com/podcast.
You're listening to All the Kings Men, the official podcast of the LA Kings. Now, here's your host, Jesse Cohen.
All right, it's Thursday. We have one of the answers to our top 10 questions facing the Kings in the summer of 2025. Joining me to talk about it, Zach Dooley. How are you doing today, Zach?
Jesse, I am doing great. We should have held that episode 3 more days because then we could have just had the answer to this question and then gotten in the Adrian Kempe question that we forgot to put in the first place.
So to be clear, we're talking about Ken Holland being named the 10th general manager in Kings history, which I don't know. Like, if you asked me a month ago how many general managers have the Kings had, I don't think I would have come up with 9 at that point. I don't know if I would have guessed lower or higher, but when I saw it written down 10th, I was like, wow, that seems low.
I feel like I would have guessed high, a higher number than that, just because
I think
the Kings
so.
are like
I would
a
have said like
second
15 or
franchise,
16.
you know, but yeah, it's about where I would have said too.
So I wasn't sure where to crowbar this into the conversation, but here seems as good a place as any. I actually went and looked at all of the 10 general managers. I can't remember when you and I talked about it, but I know it was one of the last few episodes, and I talked about the sort of existential crisis I'm going through with general managers. And so thinking about Ken Holland, who previously was a general manager in Edmonton and before that in Detroit, and he was the general manager in Detroit for, I don't know, 20 years or something like that. I thought, wow, I think he's probably the GM with the longest resume in Kings history.
I would have to think so, right?
Yeah, and so I went back, and I know in a former life I wrote a bunch of articles about the Kings for a website, and I did a bunch of research to write those articles, and so I know a little bit about former GMs of the Kings, and I was a fan of the team, obviously. So if you'll indulge me real quick, Larry Regan was the first general manager of the Kings. He served as general manager, and once he was done, he was involved in like the Alan Eagleson inquiry, but didn't have like a ton of post-career general managerial experience. After him was Jake Milford. I think Jake Milford's a Hall of Famer. After he left the Kings, he went on to be a general manager of the Canucks and was senior vice president of the Canucks. Passed away shortly after leaving, like 7 years after leaving the Kings. So not a lot of opportunity for him to pad his resume after leaving the Kings. After that was George McGuire, who pulled off some of the worst trades in franchise history, and to the best of my knowledge, didn't hold a general manager position after leaving that role for the Kings. Like, I think he was a scout for a very long time, but didn't do a fantastic job and made some questionable decisions as far as dealing with the media, I'll say. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, feel free to Google it because it's out there. Rogie Vachon served as general manager a number of different times. Again, former player, didn't have any experience after leaving the Kings. Nick Beverley was here for like 2 years, 3 years. He was general manager during the Gretzky era, but that was, about it.
Here for 2 or 3 years, but responsible for one terrific photo with Barry Melrose.
Yes. Yeah. No, that's true. It's an iconic photo. For those who don't know, it's Melrose and Beverly standing underneath the street signs that say Beverly and Melrose. It's a shame it didn't work out. But the entire McNall ownership period is one, and this is sort of why I'm bringing it up, is like, Nick Beverley was here for 3 years, I think, or parts of 3 seasons. And if you asked me to say whether or not he was a good general manager, I have no idea. if he was or wasn't. Because how do you judge somebody who's a general manager in an organization like the Kings were during that? Or I guess I'm talking about McMaster, excuse me. Beverly was assistant coach for the Kings in 81. He became head coach of the New Haven Nighthawks, spent 14 years with the Kings. I'm reading straight from Wikipedia here. Was director of player personnel, assistant general manager, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. When he was general manager, the Kings made it to the Cup in 93. Then Sam McMaster comes in and is GM from 94 to 97. And the reason I'm bringing it up is because his nickname was McMaster the Disaster. And he gets blamed for a lot of stuff. But like when he started working for the club, Bruce McNall owned it. When he finished working for the club, I'm pretty sure AEG had purchased the club. 2 owners went to prison. 1 owner put the team in bankruptcy. Like, I don't know how you even try and evaluate the job that Sam McMaster had to do. And I get it. Some of the trades in retrospect weren't great, but like, they cut the guy a little slack. Dave Taylor comes in and holds the position for quite a long time. Dean Lombardi after him held it for 11 years. Rob Blake after Dean Lombardi. So I don't know what the point of that is other than to say that like general manage, it's feeding into part of this existential crisis of like, I don't know. Ken Holland was in Detroit for 20 years and was during a period of unparalleled success, right? Like Detroit was the franchise, the league flagship team, the flagship franchise of the league for, I don't know, from 1990.
Long time.
To 2010. Yeah. I mean, this is almost 20 years.
Like I grew up as a hockey fan being like the Red Wings are always good, and it lasted
they were. They were
time.
They were in the Stanley Cup final in 95 and they were in the Stanley Cup final again in 2009. I guess was it 10, 9, 10, 8, 9?
Yeah.
I don't remember.
8 and 9. They won in 08 and lost in 09.
Yeah, and they won in 96 or no, excuse me, it was 97. The Avs won in 96. They won in 97 and 98. They won in 2002. They won in 2008 and then that's an incredible run. And Hall of Famers and like the number of guys that were on those rosters that are now in leadership positions in other clubs, is pretty impressive. So, how much of that is Ken Holland's doing? Not nothing, right? Like he was the general manager for 20 years. But running down that list of 10 GMs that have been GMs of the Kings, like I said, this is a collaborative business and it's a collaborative job. And I don't know. I don't even know where I'm going with this. I just wanted to run down that list of general managers. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. I'm not really sure where you're going with either. But I guess the Red Wing stuff, like the dude's CV is terrific, right?
Yeah.
I mean, no one out there could match the Stanley Cup wins, the Stanley Cup appearances, the playoff success. Mm-hmm. I think the Red Wings project is so different because 1, he inherited a team that was coming off a cup, and 2, he built another version of that team over 10 years, right? You go from 98 to 08, and it's like not that many guys were the same on those teams, just a couple. I look at kind of his Oilers tenure as the one that, could be more maybe replicatable. It's different because you don't have
salary cap was in place.
Salary cap era. If you look at where the Oilers were when Ken Holland took over, they had made the playoffs just one time in the McDavid-Draisaitl era. They won 1 series and they lost to Anaheim in the second round in 7 games. And that was it. Like they had missed the playoffs, I believe, the 2 years before Ken Holland came in. Mm-hmm. They made the playoffs the first 2 years he was there and lost in the first round. And then they got over the hump. Obviously, they beat the Kings 3 years in a row with Holland at the helm and won 6 series in total, with him there. I, like you, I can't say like X% of that success is due to him, right? Like we don't know. That there's a lot of factors that go into it. All I could say is that the Edmonton Oilers, when Ken Holland left, were a heck of a lot better of a team than they were when he got there. And he didn't get Connor McDavid. He didn't get Leon Draisaitl. He came into a situation with those 2 guys already in place. They're not here in LA. It's a different setup. but he made a team around those two guys into a cup contender from a team that was just fun and exciting. And I do think that that is something that can, in some ways, maybe be replicated by him with the Kings.
So two things. You're right. He didn't draft McDavid and Draisaitl, but Dean Lombardi didn't draft Anze Kopitar, Jonathan Quick, and Dustin Brown.
Yeah.
And neither did Rob Blake, right? Like, so we're now on our fourth GM, and I don't remember exactly who was it. Chiarelli who drafted McDavid, or was that even his predecessor? I think it might have been his.
It might have even been before that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know for sure. Yeah.
So it's like stuff happens, right? You
no one gets credit for Connor McDavid. He was the best player hands down in the draft where they happened to be the team that picked first, right?
Yeah. And the other thing is that I remembered why I went down that list of general managers, and I meant to add another name, which is Al Murray, who was the director of Kings scouting, who actually drafted, a bunch of players for the Kings. And so here's just really quickly, and I promise this comes to a point eventually. Al Murray joined the Kings in 1988-89 season as the scouting coordinator. I don't know what a scouting coordinator is, but I imagine in the late 80s it was similar to director of scouting. In 1994-95, Al Murray is named the director of amateur scouting for the LA Kings. He holds that position until 2007. So he was the director of amateur scouting when they drafted Anze Kopitar, Jonathan Quick, Dustin Brown. I guess that's probably the list of names that need to be mentioned. But the point is, when he was let go by the Kings, he was considered to be a bad scout. And he was one of the names that was like, oh, Al Murray, get rid of Al Murray. Well, Al Murray then went to Tampa Bay, where he served from 2010 to 2024, when he became this season and last season, he was a senior advisor. Prior to that, he was the director of amateur scouting and the assistant general manager. And I think most people would argue he did a pretty fantastic job in Tampa Bay.
Drafted just a couple of NHL regulars.
My point in bringing that up and in mentioning all of the GMs and pointing out that some of them had careers and some of them didn't afterwards is that I don't know how to evaluate. The point is that when you have longevity, that you're going to make decisions, and some of them are going to be bad and some of them are going to be good. So trying to measure up like, well, this trade was bad and that signing was bad and, but this was good and that was good and this was bad and that was bad. Okay, fine. But if a guy survives in an industry for 20 plus years, that to me is the metric that matters to me. Like, okay, if you survive for 30 years or however long you do it, if you were to go back and look at every episode of a podcast I've done, I'm sure I've said wildly, outrageously incorrect, silly, stupid things, right? I'm positive of it.
I'll plead the fifth.
Yeah. But the point is, I don't get evaluated on whether or not I say things that are right or wrong. Just like, it's longevity, right? Like you last at a job for reasons other than just a simple tallying up of how many mistakes did you make, how many right decisions you made, right? Like Dean Lombardi made tons of wrong decisions, but he's remembered as, a hero because they won. Okay, but he also was the general manager of the San Jose Sharks for a very long time before being named to the Kings. And prior to that, he was in Philadelphia in between the Sharks and the Kings. I think he was in Philadelphia. And so that's my point. It's just that longevity means generally speaking, means you're doing something right in all of the stops. So,
yeah. And like, if you want to paint Ken Holland as a great GM, you have more than enough ammo to do so.
Yeah.
If you want to paint him as a bad GM, you have some ammo to do so. Like it depends on your opinion, right? If you want to take a biased stance, you have plenty on either side to do so, as you would with any other GM in the league. But you look at what was available for the Kings, I don't think anyone could argue resume-wise that this was not the most qualified individual for the job based on Stanley Cup championships, Stanley Cup final appearances, playoff success, playoff series wins in 2 stops. I think he is hands down more qualified than anybody else. You could want something different. If you say, oh, this guy signed Darnell Nurse to a contract that was for too much money, we don't like him because of that. That's fine. Like, I get that, right? But if you look at the other candidates, most of the people that you see mentioned are guys who haven't had the chance to hand out that extension yet. So you don't know if they're going to be good or bad, right? And if you look at the profile of the last GM the Kings hired, it was an assistant GM from a team that won the Stanley Cup 3 years before, and most people didn't seem to like the job that person did. Mm-hmm. So why would you now push for that profile, right? It's literally what you just had. Yeah. And it's what most teams in the league have done. I saw an article in The Athletic today from James Myrtle. 24 of the 31 GMs in the NHL are first-time GMs.
Wow.
Which goes against a pretty widely spewed narrative that the NHL executives are just retreads. Mm-hmm. It's not true. And the guys those 7 are all pretty well accomplished guys. Like, and the point that he made was like, yeah, they're like, the people who say that have a point, but someone like Ken Holland, he isn't just a retread. He deserves to get hired based on the work that he did. It's not like he had a job and got fired for poor performance. Like, he left the Oilers. This is a guy who did a pretty good job. Why wouldn't you want to give that guy another chance somewhere else? Like, why wouldn't he be at the top of your list? So a lot of, I don't know, just a lot of thoughts that from both of us that don't necessarily mean much, but
yeah, well, because I mean, let's be clear, we have no idea how this is going to go. It's day one, right? It's not even day one. We're recording this pre-day. Well, I guess he's been announced, but the press conference hasn't happened yet when we're recording this. So you mentioned the Darnell Nurse thing, but this is what I was talking about as far as longevity. Like, sure, but he also acquired Ekholm.
And Zach Hyman. And Brett Kulak and Evander Kane and Warren Fogle.
Corey Perry.
All guys, all guys who you would look at and be like, they helped beat the Kings.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing where it's like, okay, nobody takes credit for Leon Draisaitl or Connor McDavid, because when you have talents like that, it's right. It's like, Fuda and Yannetti always like to point out that they were the ones who drafted Doughty, but it's like, well, okay. I mean, I suppose you could have taken Bogosian or Pietrangelo, but even if you had taken Pietrangelo, it was a pretty good pick. And if you'd taken Bogosian, it's not like he's a total bum. He's not on the same level as Stamkos, Doughty, and Pietrangelo, but like, okay, the second overall pick and you didn't blow it. That's like, okay, good. What I hope, and this is just speaking as a fan, what I hope for the Ken Holland tenure as GM of the Kings is 2 things. One, we heard Rob Blake speak last summer about a need to get uncomfortable. Yeah. And I think it's fair to say that one of the reasons the Kings lost this year in the playoffs to Edmonton is that Edmonton is much more experienced at being uncomfortable or playing uncomfortable hockey. A lot of the players who bring the uncomfortableness were Holland ads. So I hope for that. And then this is the other one. And this is this I know very little about Ken Holland. I want to be perfectly clear about that. But you couldn't be a hockey fan for the last 30 years without knowing about the Red Wings. And there have been multiple movies, not like obviously big time, Hollywood movies, but multiple feature length documentaries made about Detroit in one way or the other, whether it was about their foray into Russian scouting or, their conflict with Colorado, whatever. Like, there have been a lot of them. And it seemed perfectly clear to me that Detroit had this really unique collaborative front office where it was Holland and Devellano and Illich. And I know I'm leaving out some other names. I believe whoever the scout was that scouted.
Jim Nill was there.
Yeah.
Dallas Stars GM.
Yeah. And a lot of brilliant guys. And so to be the hub of a collaborative, brilliant front office, or to even just to be part of it, because he wasn't always the GM. I think he was the director of scouting for a while.
And the general manager of the AHL's Adirondack Red Wings in Glens Falls, New York.
My hope is that he comes with that experience working in a collaborative way to an organization that already has a Mark Yannetti, who we all, well, I like very much and respect. I don't know how much everybody else likes him, but I mean, he's been here forever.
I do too.
So I'm assuming most people like him and respect him. You have Mark Yannetti, you have Glenn Murray, you have Nelson Emerson, you have Luc Robitaille, you have, you know what I mean? Like, there are voices and people who have been in the league, who have served in multiple roles for a long time. It will be Luc Robitaille alluded to it in his press conference when he talked about whoever the new GM is, it'll be a team effort, right? Then the search for the GM. And so I hope that his experience in Detroit, and to be clear, it's 20 years of experience in one role. And then I'm sorry, I don't off the top of my head know how long he served in his other roles in Detroit, but I mean, it was a unique organization. And Luc Robitaille has talked about the things that he learned when he went there as a player, and he looked around and he saw how they did things, and has talked about wanting to bring that way of doing things to the Kings organization. And so, again, as a fan, I hope that this move continues that process, because it's hard to argue with the success. I mean, no, it's not hard. It's impossible to argue with the success that Detroit had over almost 30 years.
Yeah, you can't.
Yeah.
I agree with a lot of what you said there. One thing though that I think is important is, like, I hope that he comes in and is aggressive in his own way, not just
for sure
doing things, the same way that they've been done here. I think it is important that, a new general manager puts his stamp on the team. This is not going to be a rebuild. I don't think it's even going to be a retool. Like, this is a team that is, I think it's at a hump, right? The hump of getting over round one, getting into round two, and trying to go on a playoff run. You don't get to that point if you're not somewhat close. And I think you ask, like, how how close are the Kings? Are they right there? To use the meme, they're not 5 players away. They're a couple right moves away from getting over that hump. And I think that's what Ken Holland did in Edmonton. And he didn't do it in 1 year. I think if you look at the team that beat the Kings in 22 and the team that beat the Kings in 24, the team in 24 was so much better. Mm-hmm. And that's moves that he made, right? And you look at the guys playing in-depth roles there, and one, he didn't trade younger players to get older players. He traded a lot of draft picks, but he did not trade younger players. He worked in Bouchard, Broberg, Holloway, McLeod. Those players were traded, but they weren't traded by Ken Holland. Those players developed and were brought into the system by Ken Holland. But he also did acquire veteran role players who, to your point earlier, knew how to win in the playoffs. Guys who played a style of hockey that was built for the playoffs. He clearly identified that was what was needed around the core that he had, and he brought those guys in. And how many Edmonton Cold Heroes do you curse because of how, like, Nick Bjugstad, right? Yeah. Like, I still remember, I think he had 2 goals, 2023 Game 5 in a 2-2 series. Like, he came in and did a good job. Corey Perry. You know how you feel about Corey Perry? That guy had a good series this year, and he's an impactful player. And Evander Kane is an impactful player. They play a certain way, right? And those players were targeted by Ken Holland for a certain reason. They made their impact felt, I think, in these playoff series against the Kings and the series that the Oilers won beyond that. So I think that you want him to come in and identify what is that type of player that the Kings need to get over that hump. And there's a lot of cap space. Kings have a lot of assets, draft pick wise, to make moves if needed. They have players who could be moved in and out. Go get those kind of players and get this team over the hump quickly, because that is why I think the Kings specifically wanted Ken Holland.
Yeah, and it will be an interesting tenure, because this is not the sort of thing that is announced officially. But, given his age, I think it is widely assumed that he will not serve in the role for 11 years, the way like Dean Lombardi did or something, right? Like
Rob Blake was what, 8? Dean was 11 and Dave Taylor was 9. I don't think I agree with you. I don't think
Wikipedia has it listed in days, which is funny to me. Rob Blake served for 2,947 days. Dean Lombardi served for 4,007 days, and Dave Taylor served for 3,283 days. I don't think that Ken Holland will serve for more than 4,000 days as general manager of the LA Kings. It could happen, I suppose, but
I mean, approaching 70 years old, right?
Yeah.
And look, this is not a guy who's here to like I said, to rebuild the team, right? Like he's here to get them over the hump, and he's here to do it quickly. And I think that's what he was brought here by the Kings to do. And I would agree. I don't think he's here to do it for 10 years.
Nick Nixon, for example, is the same age as Ken Holland, and Nick Nixon is retiring. So
how many days has Nick Nixon been with the Kings?
It's got to be 5 digits at least. But so the point is that part of, and this speaks to his experience in Detroit, part of his role, and it won't be publicized, it won't be discussed, it won't be anything that anybody writes articles about, probably, is that the next general manager will probably cut their teeth during this general manager's tenure, whatever. And that's interesting, right? Like, so, okay, now the question becomes, all right, well, so Ken Holland comes in, he's had an incredible career, right? That has spanned multiple teams and multiple decades. So, Luc Robitaille said in his press conference before, whatever it was, a week and a half ago now, you can't hire a general manager and then immediately tie their hands behind their back, right? That's my metaphor, not his. So he may bring people with him. Unclear if he will or won't. That maybe that's for the press conference to announce. Maybe not. Maybe it'll be a process of over the months and weeks of the summer. We might get signings and who knows. So do other executives come in? Does he, there are decisions to be made about players, coaches, I don't expect there to be changes to the coaching staff, but Luc Robitaille said it, you can't let the GM, or you can't not let the GM make his own decisions. So, it's not as simple as just, Ken Holland replaces Rob Blake and status quo moving forward, everything, nothing else changes. Like, I have no idea how much other things will change, but for a guy with a career as long as Ken Holland's, who has made connections and worked with all sorts of different people, you have to expect at least somebody else being hired. I don't know who.
I mean, you look at some other organizations that I would consider to be well run, and that's how they did it, right? You look at Tampa Bay, right? It was Yzerman, and then when he left, Brisebois was already there. He was ready to step in. You look at Vegas and Colorado. Their current GMs were hired as assistant GMs, and the GM was eventually promoted to a president role. The assistant GM was ready to step in. Now, maybe that person is already in-house, maybe not, but you would like it to go that way, right? That's how it always should go. I don't know, like you said, if that person would be hired tomorrow. Maybe it's a month from now. Maybe it's 6 months from now. Maybe it's a year from now. But that in an ideal world would be the succession plan that you'd want to put in place, where you could get someone in who, in an ideal world, observes a well-functioning machine. And when the time comes for a guy who is probably towards the end of his career in Ken Holland to move on, likely by his own choice, it's done with the next guy already in place who can keep things going. And I think that's what we've seen successful organizations do over, the last few years, just with the few I mentioned.
Yeah. And to that point, I guess my final hope for this move is that you maintain the stability that has already been built while adding to it. I was talking to my mom today, who's in town, and we were just talking about careers and how people make choices and everything. And I just said, would things have gone totally differently if I had made different choices? Yes, of course they would. But, there is stability is valuable. And, to your point about the roster, like, this won't be a teardown, this won't be a rebuild, and you just hope that whatever changes are made add to the structure without removing from the structure.
Exactly.
Yeah. So there'll be a press conference on Thursday. We're recording this on Wednesday, the 14th. Ken Holland will have an opportunity to speak to the media. I'm assuming questions will start getting answered on Thursday. How quickly and how many remains to be seen. But in the meantime, congratulations, Ken Holland, and welcome to LA, I guess.
Yeah, good to have another Adirondack alum in the building.
Yeah. Thanks for joining me, Zach, and we will begin talking about other off-season stuff as soon as it starts happening. Keep your ears and eyes open, Kings fan.